Good evening.
Hello. Hi.
My name is Chris Rodolico. I'm a special agent with the FBI. I'm talking to you tonight about sextortion. Before I begin my presentation, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've been an FBI agent for 13 years. I work for the Detroit field office, which is one of 56 field offices in the United States that the FBI has. Lansing is called a resident agency of the Detroit field office, and there's 10 other resident agencies, so sub-offices of the Detroit field office. I work for the Lansing office. I work all types of crimes, and I have for my 13 years. I've worked terrorism, violent crime, white-collar crime, kidnapping, and what brings me here tonight is my work in crimes against children. Why am I here? We receive and are receiving too many of these complaints for sextortion, and they're coming in at an exponential rate, and I'll talk to you about how many we've seen over the years and how many we're seeing now. This is a preventable crime. It's a priority. Kids are a priority. And this happened to a friend of mine's child. They were extorted for money in exchange for not releasing of sexual pictures of themselves. And that hit me because I started to realize this is happening too close to home. A lot of the crimes that I investigate are not really close to home, but this one was. Who am I here with? I'm here with your local police. Chief Maroney from DeWitt Township is here. Chief Ferguson's here from the city of DeWitt. We work with them all the time. We work with a little more. Lansing covers Clinton, Ingham, and Eaton counties. So specifically, I cover those counties, but I'm all over the state and sometimes the country, but mainly we focus on those 3 counties. When I was up in St. John's last week, Sheriff Dush was there with me because we work hand in hand with our local partners on like TV. We actually have a good relationship and we work hand in hand. And this doesn't always rise to our level. But I'll talk more about their piece of this later and why it's such an important component. I'm not here because I was voluntold. This is an initiative that means a lot to me, and I'm taking it somewhat upon myself, but my offices taking it upon themselves to have these talks. This is something I wish we could have talked about back in 2010 when we had cell phones, but our kids mostly didn't. And we didn't have nearly the access to the internet on our phones. I have uncomfortable conversations for a living. What I'm going to ask you parents tonight is you're going to have uncomfortable conversations with your kids, but I think it's for a good cause. You're going to see tonight that I'm going to talk about parents, but I might say stuff about teachers and schools. It's all the same thing, right? We're adults and we're looking out for our kids. Something else I'll point out at this point is this is not new to happening to kids because it's been happening to adults for years and years and years, but you're going to see that the targeting of the kids has become very prevalent in the last couple of years. What's the difference? The difference is that if it happens to me, I can get through this problem that I'm having a lot easier than, say, a 13-year-old would be able to. And also, when I go through this presentation, I want you to think of it a little bit through the kids' eyes. There's going to be some stuff that's targeted at parents, and you're going to need to think about with your kids, but I want you to also really think about what a child would be going through if this happened to them, because I think that's the important way that it will help you parent, teacher, or what have you. Sextortion. Back to why it's important with kids. This is the director. We at the FBI have no greater mission than to protect the nation's children from harm. Director Ray didn't need to tell us that. He doesn't need to tell the police that. They know that. Sextortion. I'm not going to bore you with the top definition, but that is the definition of sextortion. So what is sextortion? It's a fancy way to say people are willingly sending sexual images of themselves, and then trouble ensues. And I want to especially accentuate this yet again. People equals college students adults and our children, which is the main reason we're here, but this happens at an alarming rate to adults. What do we do in law enforcement to protect our children? The way I see it, mainly we enforce the laws, and so we put bad people in jail, and that protects future bad acts. But as you can imagine, that's not always that fruitful, because constantly those people that are in jail, their place is taken by someone new. And another thing we do in law enforcement is we educate. We inform the public. That's what we're here doing tonight. But also we're educating the parents, because you're our first line in combating this threat. Another reason I'm here, it's affecting our children at a huge rate. And what we're seeing is these pictures are being used against kids for blackmail and extortion. That's where you get the extortion from. And obviously with that, the sharing of lewd, nude photographs of kids, sexually explicit images, we're seeing our kids face higher levels of anxiety, embarrassment, and depression and fear. I didn't need to tell you that, because we know that in society that's happening. This isn't the only cause, but just think of what this would add if there's naked pictures of a child out there and then they have to go to school. And then the most extreme cases are leading to suicide. The FBI numbers say there's been 18 suicides that they can directly relate to sextortion. That number is going to be much higher in my view, just because we don't always know why that happens. Let me ask you a question to the parents in this room. How many of you know of a local incident where a child was asked for a nude photo, and this isn't necessarily by an unknown person, it could be by a known person, with a show of hands? All right, I would say that by high school, like 90% of the kids know, at least, if not 100% of the kids know of an incident where a child was asked for a nude photograph, either by someone they knew or didn't know. So I talked about sextortion briefly, but I'm just going to go over it again. What is happening is people, whether they're in the United States or abroad, are asking our kids to share naked photos of themselves or sexually explicit photos. That can be peers, that can be unknown people on the internet, it can be people internationally. So who's doing this? And I'm going to go through the 4 major categories here. So the first category is your creeps. Cyber intruders, peers, and then sextortionists. I'm going to concentrate on the 4th one, but I'm going to go through the first 3 real quick here. So what's a creep? This is the person that targets mainly younger people to share photographs of themselves. They collect their own libraries. They trade with other pedophiles for these types of things. And this person can lead, this type of person could lead to the meeting up with a child. Cyber intruder, what's this? This is like the Jason Bourne CIA type stuff that you think about, where you think about someone like backdooring their way into your computer, getting access to your phone, and eliciting photos of you or other things. They also use social engineering, and what social engineering is the use of deception to manipulate individuals into giving information. So I gave an example here. Hi Chris, we have a friend in common. You know Doug from the YMCA in DeWitt? So do I. Went to college with his wife Jane. Will you accept my connection in LinkedIn? I'm a professional. I know Doug. I know his wife's name is Jane. So I accept that friendship. That's social engineering. This person who's doing this really doesn't exist as who they say they are, but I friend them. Then you're friends with me, so you see I'm friends with them, so you friend them, and then they develop a network of friends, and they don't even exist. The thing I want to impress upon you about cyber intruders is this is very rare. And so when someone comes to me and says, hey, someone got a naked picture of me, I think they broke into my phone and found it, I pretty much know they're lying. This is very, very rare. This type of malware and cyber intrusion that we talk about, it's not something that is generally available in the public. Peer-to-peer. Now this is a huge problem, and I know it's a problem in DeWitt because I get a letter at the beginning of the school year that talks, it's sent to parents, and they talk about peers sharing naked photos of themselves. It's a huge problem in our society, and we've had local students, not at this school, but in a school local to us, we've had kids arrested for sextorting their classmates. This is kind of a sub-issue, which is these kids today are sharing photographs of themselves with their classmates at an alarming rate. That being said, it makes it easier for them to then share photographs with people on the internet that they may not know because they've already done this before. I'm going to show you a video now, and this will really get into the beginning of the crux of our talk here tonight.
A typical sextortion case would be that a child was in a forum, in a game, and they just start chatting. It starts out like anybody else. You're just talking about the game or talking about whatever forum they're in. It could be on anything. And that predator is a manipulator. They're very good at what they do. They know how to pick up on cues from that child. So if that child got in a fight with their mom, his or her mom, that predator is going to play on that. Like, I'm here for you. You can talk to me. Your mom's a jerk. Your mom's this.
So one of the scenarios we've seen when it comes to young girls is that it's going to be a teenage boy. They're going to look if the child's social media profile is open. They're going to try to profile who she likes, what her likes are, and what that would look like for her if she met somebody online. And then that's who they're going to become.
As a predator, you can actually create an online profile that matches the preferences of that child. So as that child interacting with that fake account and they're getting catfished, what they are experiencing is this super arousing stimuli where the catfish or the predator is telling them what they want to hear. They tell them about their favorite music, about their favorite food, about their favorite sports, and even pick a profile picture that looks like their favorite love interest.
I know you've been waiting for this for a while. I wanted to give you something special.
They're absolutely going to become that dream person, that Prince Charming for her, and it's going to be slow. It's going to be whatever she's first initially comfortable with, and then it's going to progress. Now, when I say slow, that doesn't mean that it's days, it's weeks, it's months. It could literally be 2 conversations in one day. We are aware of cases that we have had a child take off their clothes within an hour of meeting somebody online. Scenario B, we'll use a boy because it's important that we keep reiterating that boys have this happen to them. So sometimes with the boys, it could be that they think they're talking to a female, particularly like maybe an adult female. It's less like a teen type of situation and more with an adult. And then that adult will say to them, maybe like, I'll send you a photo of me naked if you'll send me a photo of you naked. And so the boy sends the one image to who he thinks is a girl, and then he's expecting another one back. And what he gets instead is, now I'm going to share this with everybody.
And then it can turn. If the child gets nervous or scared, then it turns into the threatening. Okay, well, you sent me that image of you. I'm going to send it to all of your friends on Facebook, all of your friends on Instagram, so you need to keep doing it. And then the child's scared, and they don't know that they can just stop. They're children. They're scared. They think that whatever this predator says is true. It can get really dark really quickly. It never starts out as send me a nude picture of yourself. No, it's a slow transition, and then it's too late, and the child feels overwhelmed, and then they continue because they're afraid. Sextortion is manipulating a child to send inappropriate pictures, to do inappropriate things on camera, or to eventually meet up with the predator. we as humans leak out information. We leak out information when we're on the internet, when we're on chatting sites. It's going to happen. They're going to take that information and use it against you. They're going to talk about the football games this weekend. They're going to talk about homecoming. They're going to talk about the things that relate to you. They're never going to let it slip that they, have a job or they live in, their mother's basement or whatever it is. They are never going to reveal to you the true nature of who they are. So the best thing you can do is never have conversations, never share anything with anybody unless you absolutely know who they are. You know it's your best friend Susie who lives down the street because it's the same number you've been using for 3 years or the same, ID. But we think, oh, it's just the internet and it's a 16-year-old kid. They're not.
You may have a child who, because of what was going on online with them, can't or won't vocalize that to the parents, so they're trying to hide it. But they're going to show it. They're going to want to avoid certain places because maybe they're afraid the perpetrator is there. They don't want to go back to school because they think that whoever they were talking to online was a student or a teacher, so they don't know. So they're going to try to avoid that contact with them. They're going to not sleep well anymore. They're going to potentially either gain weight or lose weight. Unfortunately, cutting is also something that our little ones are, when they're being victimized, that they'll do. And the shame is causing them to want to fold in on themselves and just not talk to anybody and try to deal with it on their own, but they just can't.
And I think from what we've seen, it typically only stops when the child either tells an adult or the offender is identified in some kind of law enforcement investigation.
I'm going to have references at the end, including this one. Okay. They just did a really nice job of kind of defining what sextortion was and how it works. I'm going to outline a couple things. That video is not old, but it's slightly dated. And the reason why I'll say that is a couple things. One, they made a point to say, this happens to boys too. I'm going to tell you that it's happening. That is gone to mostly boys now. Like, it's tilted the scales, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But some of the stuff they did really well was that girl sent a picture or some pictures, and immediately they sent back a collage of pictures of her and said, we're going to send these out. And same with the boy. He sent out a picture and they said, send us $500 or we're going to send this to all your friends. That's exactly how it happens, and it happens almost instantaneously. And the reason why is I think there's been a shift over the last 5 years where this used to be creeps doing it. Well, now we have overseas actors doing this. And what they've shifted into doing is, instead of targeting the elderly, which they're still doing, and other vulnerable groups with romance scams and other things like that, Craigslist scams, now what they're doing is they're going after our children. And the reason why is it's quick money. It's quick money. And if you do send $500, they're just going to ask you for $500 more. So we're going to talk about a little bit what we can do as parents. It says, this has happened at local schools, high schoolers to other high schoolers. And ultimately, the goal is to obtain something of leverage over your child. Excuse me. So it doesn't have to start with sexually explicit pictures. It can start with other things, and I'll talk about it. So here's an example. A child says, I just had a fight with my dad. The person online says, he seems so unreasonable. The child says, he's an a-hole. So the person now has this leverage over your child, especially a younger child. Send me a photo of your legs, or I'll share the text thread with your dad. Fictitious names, fictitious date of workplace that I made up. But this is how it works. We talked about social engineering a little bit earlier. They talked about it on that video about how we leak information. It's really easy to find out information about people. And so you can find out things like this. So think about this from a child's point of view. They just said something about their parent that they don't want anyone to find out, and once they get out of jail free, they just have to send photos of their legs or something like that. Well, now that person is going to have two things. And this is a form of blackmail, right? Because it doesn't include money. But if they ask for money, then it turns into sextortion. They're both sextortions by definition, I suppose, but that's where it heads. So here's an example of something that doesn't seem that bad that a kid would be doing, and they think they're okay, they're not doing anything that bad, they're just talking to someone they don't know, and then this happens. Another example. This is the bad person. I've enjoyed texting you so much, I want to send you a photo of me. So the boy says, I'd love to see who I'm talking to. And like they said in the video, this could have been going on for a few days, a few weeks, but the person found someone, and that person on the other end of the computer is just trying to placate them and make them feel great about themselves. So this boy gets a naked photo of an attractive girl. And now the person says, send me a photo of whatever you're comfortable with. Well, of course they're going to reciprocate, and because they think that person has just shared themselves with them, so they share themselves with that person. And then quickly you get the send me $500, or I'll send this to all of your friends, and they name the friends, because I can go on Facebook and probably find you, and then I can find the people you're friends with, and I can message those people. I might even be friends with them on Facebook, and I might show you that I'm friends with them on Facebook. Again, think of this through a child's lens where $500 is what they need to get rid of. And kids these days have more money than we did when I was a kid, so maybe they do use their iPay or whatever they have, the money they've got for Christmas, they've saved up from their job, and they send the money. Well, the problem's not going away. Once they get money, they're just going to ask for more money. They have two choices, to pay or not pay. It's a no-win situation. Even if they do pay, they're just going to be asking for more money. And when it's all over, when the kid finally says, I don't have any more money, they send the pictures anyway. So as you can see, we never want to get to this point. Why does this happen? Like, what are these people counting on? And this is, again, something that as parents, you need to think about how are you going to prep your kids for a situation like this. Because our kids know people know that our kids want to please us. And our kids know they did something wrong. So basically your kids are being faced with this: pay the extortion or face my parents. And I think that's one of the keys to this presentation is, are your kids going to face you when they get in trouble? And sometimes these problems are compounded, right? They've already paid money, and they've sent naked pictures of themselves. And oh, by the way, these naked pictures are now running around a school or a social media platform or an app. So we want our kids to face us. We want them to tell an adult, tell the school, tell the police. And this is something that we need to open the dialogue with our children now, so if they find themselves in these situations, they're coming to us. I talked about why this works. There's a lot of reasons. But with COVID, what did we do? Our kids had to stay home. We put them on computers. There's nothing we could have done, right? But it became normal for them to grow friendships, potentially in middle school, via the phone or computers. And that's what they had to do for a good year. So it's even normal for me to meet someone and then start texting with them as a friendship. That's very normal. Our kids are no different. There's the reciprocation. So they've received a naked photo. It's easy for them to send one back, so they think. But I think this is a big one too. You know, when you go through middle school and high school, your friends become boring, and your classmates don't understand you. You're not popular, potentially, and these are things you're striving for. Well, the person on the other end of the computer is going to satisfy some of those things for you. They're going to make you popular, right? You are popular with them, and it becomes very fulfilling for our kids. Something else I want to talk about is your kids are a victim of fraud when this happens. I work a lot of fraud, and so what I'm seeing, one thing that was told to me by an agent once was, the whole purpose of a fraud is you don't know you're being defrauded when it's happening. it's easy as an investigator to think, like, why did this elderly person send $100,000 to someone overseas to unlock $1 million? Like, we all sit here and go, that would never happen to me. They didn't know what was happening. That's the problem. And our kids are in this same situation. The criminal's intentionally misrepresenting who they are, and they're attempting to gain money, and in some cases, just more photographs. But our kids are being defrauded. So we expect our kids to make mistakes, and we expect our kids to be more naive. We know this about children. That's part of the reasons we have educators and we try to be parents. This is another one of those. This is like a fraud you need to talk to your kids about. Who's being victimized? It's happening to males and females. I can tell you that it used to be like a primarily female thing. People were seeking out for females. But now, like I told you, the scale has shifted and it's really attacking young boys. I should say boys. Another issue. If you're struggling with or you're having a sexual identity crisis or moment or you don't know, you don't want to tell your friends that necessarily. That's a private thing. So who better to talk to than some random person your age on the internet? And guess what? That person's going to be struggling with the same things that the child is struggling with. So it's very easy for them to confide with that person because this person's struggling with exactly the same problems that they have. Why? Because they're a fraudster and they're an imposter. They're just mirroring this child. And so they confide with these people. Anyone the criminal can gain trust with, anyone who has freedom on the internet or on their cell phone can be a target. It's an impossible venture to try and keep up with apps that are on phones. I'm just gonna, we all know what apps look like. Those are them. There's a new app called Be Real. There's one called Likey. There's a calculator app, and you parents who are inclined to go through your children's phone, click on their calculator app, because there are apps that are made to look like a calculator app, and when you click on it, it can mask other apps. Minecraft. Here's one that we let our kids play online, and they can talk to their friends, right? Well, they can get into bigger chat rooms. And so that's one that these bad actors are using to target our kids because we think it's just Minecraft, it's safe. It's not necessarily safe. You get into the higher age teenage boys, you got like first-person shooter games, PUBG, and others. These are other games that you can join up in teams. People start friendships on these, and they can start to be targeted. What can parents, schools do? So I grabbed this one slide off. I thought it was decent. Some of the things I'm going to talk about, I'm kind of talking to kids, but I'm expecting that you parents are going to talk to kids. So these are some of the things. This has different ways to stay in control. Don't take images of yourself that you wouldn't want everyone to see. I don't like that so much because it's easy to take a picture of yourself and say, no one else is, I don't mind if anyone sees this, because you don't plan on showing anyone else. But the truth is, having that picture is a problem in itself. So I changed that to do not take images of yourself. It's not don't send them, it's just don't even take them. So basically don't take nude photos of yourself, ever. That's the one thing I would want to impress upon the kids. Talk to your kids, talk to your students. It's the second key. The first key we'll get to. So I'm going to go through some scenarios here of discussions that I think are important to have with kids, our kids. Our kids think they're in trouble if this happens to them. So a discussion. If you were to get into this situation where you're being asked for naked photos or even compromising photos, tell us, you will not be in trouble. This is hard, right? Like as a parent, we don't want to give our kids get out of jail free cards any more than the FBI does or the police want to give get out of jail free cards. But if your kid is at the stage where they're being asked for a naked photo, there's still hope that they have not gotten into the really bad stuff. So they may have said bad stuff about you or seen bad stuff, but they're not quite there yet. This is a tough one. We have to remember that our kids in this situation are victims. Yeah, they did something wrong, but they're victims in this, right? And so as part of that, I think this conversation is very akin to, and I have teenage kids, like, I don't ever want you to drink. Don't ever drink. But if you do, you cannot drive. You have to call me. So this is the same thing, right? I know we've told you not to use these apps, but if you find yourself in a spot where you're in trouble, because maybe you're doing something that you were told not to do, you've got to tell us, because we don't want to see you get hurt. I kind of didn't tell you something at the beginning. I have 4 kids. They range from 14 to 19 years old. About 5 years ago, I started having these talks with my kids, like, because I'd see stuff at work and I would go home, and then I would tell them a story, a veiled story, but about what was happening in the world that I was seeing locally. It was just a couple years ago that I recognized, actually when my friend, this kid got victimized by this, that I realized, like, it's not fair. It's not fair that you parents don't get to see this. Maybe it is fair. I don't know. You don't want to see this any more than I do. But it's not fair that I get this education at work and then I go home and share it with my kids, but who's sharing that with you? So that's kind of part of this. The perpetrators are counting on your child's fear, insecurity, embarrassment of getting in trouble to force them into pay. If someone asks you for money to make your problems go away, come talk to us. We realize that would mean you probably did something wrong, but we're here to help you. Don't have these kids, $500 might be that's everything they have potentially. Maybe they have, a couple $1,000 and they start throwing money at a problem just to find out that the problem didn't go away. They still have to tell their parents about it, and there's probably naked photos of them floating around. So, again, this is, a face your parents moment. Another example of something we talk to our kids about is we know that you don't want to let us down. So if someone's trying to get you to send sexual pictures or videos, you're just making it worse. Come to us. We understand that you'll be embarrassed, but how much more embarrassed would you be for sending money and sending pictures? Other conversations that you can have that don't involve such poignant things such as getting sextorted is just, what do you do? Ask your kids, what do they do? What do you do if someone asks you to take a naked photo of yourself? What would you do if someone sends you a naked photo of you just receive one? These are things we want our kids to come to us with because they can help stop this. For instance, if your child received a photo of a friend, that friend is in trouble, right? And so this is like one of those scenarios where you would want to talk to that kid's parents or talk to the police or what have you. I haven't even mentioned this, but all the photos that I'm talking about are considered child pornography. So that's another huge issue here. It is almost unheard of for a child to be charged with the possession of child pornography, especially when it's reciprocal or when there's something like that going on. It can happen because kids can sextort other kids can extort other kids for naked photos, but it's a quandary for law enforcement when this happens. Eaton County told me they didn't have as big a problem because they've had kids they've made them run their phones over in the parking lot with their cars, and that seemed to help Eaton County.
Good to know.
I don't know if that's true.
Hang on, talk again on the camera.
What would you do if someone asked you for money to not share something with your parents? In sports, it's all about like, what happens if this happens? If this, then that. If this, then that. These conversations are conversations that we want our kids that we want to have that dialogue with them. If you start that early, if this, then that, they may be more apt to do it. And I give you some examples there of stranger danger. What do you do in a fire? What do you do if someone asks you for drugs? Well, this is one of those, goes back to that uncomfortable conversation that I would say have these conversations because it really could help some kids. This is probably the first story that I told my kids. When I heard this one, I went right home and told them. I tell this story better than it is there. So it was a colleague of mine, and his kid was in high school. His kid was a freshman in high school, and it happened to be his son's friend. It wasn't in this area. And so basically the kid got pestered, the young man got pestered by a senior to send a photo. She was popular. This kid didn't exactly know why he was being targeted by this girl, but she was interested in him. And it felt good to him, so he sent her a picture. That picture went over the whole high school, and that kid got a nickname out of that picture. And this is maybe called a scare tactic, but hey, do you want to be a freshman in high school, and do you want a nickname based on a naked photo of yourself going out? I certainly wouldn't. Maybe that will resound with some kids, and that's a true story. This is super important. I wouldn't be here tonight if I was talking about something that I did not think was affecting kids in this area, or was like 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. If your kids are in apps, if they are active in the Snapchats and all the other Instagrams, if they are active and they are getting friends and talking to their friends, and it's more than just their small group of friends, I promise you they're being targeted. And the people in this room, I can judge from your age, you're like me, so about my age. When we were a kid, like there was white vans, and they were going to school buses, and they had puppies, and they had candy, and they were luring the kids, right? I grew up in Connecticut. I got kids in it. I don't think you grew up in Connecticut, but I don't ever remember a substantiated story about the van with the puppies and the candy. I'm sure it did happen. I don't ever remember a real story where that happened in an area that I lived, but we all heard about it. I remember my mom driving the car to our bus stop and sitting at the bus stop in fear of this, in the mid-'80s, in fear of this danger. I wouldn't be here talking about that danger because I don't know about it. It has not affected me in my professional capacity. This does. This is real. And when I had that picture of Africa up, and those criminal enterprises, like I said earlier, that were targeting the elderly, they've shifted. They're criminal enterprises that are targeting the young people of America in exactly what I'm telling you. This is not some fairy tale danger. And that's something to tell the kids, that they are being targeted on these apps. So, what if this happens to my child? I should have happens or happened, because some of you may know of a child that this happened to. There's 3 main steps. I want you to go to the police, I want you to inform the schools, and I want to get you to get your child the help they need. Why is the FBI not on there? There's 10 agents in my office. We covered the 3 counties, but I know that the police in all those areas are very interested in this, and I don't have relationships with schools like the local police do. And so if you come and tell me it's not going to be like, oh, yeah, we can put together a pattern. They're going to put together the pattern, and when it gets to a point, they can elevate it to me. If someone is social engineering a school, so if someone is friending kids at DeWitt High School, they're going to friend a lot of kids at DeWitt High School. And why bother targeting one child when they can target as many of those friendships as they've developed? They're going to be targeting them all. And so the police may know that. If the police are told that this has happened 3 times at DeWitt High School, they can start to piece together the fact that, oh, there's a group, and they can start, and they will involve the FBI when necessary, and if it's something that we can help with. The school is another place that's going to be putting this together, right? Like if it's DeWitt High School and counselors have 3 people come in and tell them that this has happened to them. And when I say this is happening to them, It doesn't mean the worst, like they were sextorted. It could mean just that they were solicited for these pictures. They'll start to put that together, and they will engage the police. And so that's the two important things in terms of reporting. And then get your child the help they need. This is going to be your call. This is going to be dependent on your child, their age, and what happened to them. But that's really, really important. If this happens to your child and you just try to brush it under the rug, you again, think of it through your child's perspective and them going back to school every day with the potential of facing that classroom full of people. And then, lastly, I put the FBI's internet crime site. IC3.gov, that's where our internet crimes are reported. And that would be another thing that you could do. But keep in mind that that's going to go all the way to DC. That does not get routed to our office. It's going to go all the way to DC, get vetted through there, and then come back. So that's like a real long road. Could take a couple days before it gets back to us. But it is something that could help with the tracking of something, a crime like this. Some statistics. I got asked this. I'll go over the statistics at the very end. 2 keys that I came up with. Don't take naked photos of yourself. Again, like I said, some of this is written towards kids. And then make sure your kids know that they can go to you if they're in trouble. I can tell your kids the first bullet. I cannot make the second bullet true. The statement, "You don't know my dad," that's a fair statement, right? In a lot of cases, it probably is with my kids. You don't know my dad. You need to fix that for situations like this. All right, I really hope to talk to a lot of kids this year. So I pulled this from my presentation for kids. But again, think of this is what I would say to kids, and I want you to think of it through their eyes. Make the decision not to take naked photographs or videos of yourself. Guard yourself online at all times with everyone you know and don't know. Make the decision to tell someone you trust if this did or does happen to you. Make the decision to help your friends make the right decisions. Remember, our kids are friends with other kids, and depending on your child might have power over another kid. That can be good, that can be bad. But in the good way, help your kids to help the other kids around them make good decisions. Don't ask your peers to make bad decisions. Help us get you the help you need. Again, if I'm talking to kids, I guarantee if I talk to a group of 100 kids or more, someone's gone through this. Someone's shared naked photos and, at a minimum, shared naked photos and regretted it later. They need to get the help they need. Make the choice to face your parents when you get in trouble. You're worth so much to your family, your community, your schools. If I was talking to the kids, I would point out the fact that the police are here, the FBI's here. It's because we care about them. That's the facts of it. It's happening to college-age people at an alarming rate too. It's just that they're a little more apt to handle it. That's the only reason you don't hear so much about it. These are the resources that I said that I would talk about. FBI.gov/stop sextortion. If you go to FBI.gov, you can navigate to that. It's pretty easy. That film I showed you, that's open source. It's sextortionfilm.com. There are 3 videos in that series. I finally watched 2 and 3 today. I hadn't watched them. They're really good. If this is something that you're like, I want to talk to my kids about this, watch the video I showed you. It's 1. There's 2 and 3 on there. Watch those and see if it's something that you think your kids should watch. I think it's really good. MissingKids.org is going to bring you to the NCMEC site, National Center for Endangered and Missing Children. They do a lot with this, so they also have resources. The bottom line is, if you Google sextortion tools or whatever, you're going to find good resources for yourself. You'd be hard-pressed to find bad resources. The last thing I'll leave you with is statistics. This is just the Detroit division. Detroit division covers just Michigan. So there's 300 agents. We're all assigned to a place in Michigan. In 2018, there was 41 complaints that came in on sextortion type cases. So a complaint doesn't necessarily make a full case, but it's this happened to someone, and whether we were able to work it or not is a different story. So 2018, 41, 2019, 30. So we're like at about average of about 35 per year. 2020, 153. 2021, 180. 2022, 657. That means it got to the FBI. That number is, the number of times this happened in the state in 2022 is not 657. That's the number of times it came into the FBI. And I can tell you that a huge 90% of them don't. So that number you could probably multiply times 10. So you can see how exponentially, it's about 18 times it's gone up from 2018 and 2019 to 2022. That's what I have, and I'm open to questions.
So I was trying to use the mic for anyone who had questions, but. Just have to talk loud enough, I guess. Maybe you can repeat the question.
I'll repeat the question if anyone has a question. Well, if there's no questions, I will stay after. Yes?
Is this happening to children like in the elementary school age that are on games if we're not blocking the internet from it?
The question is this happening to elementary school students? I'm sure it is. I would say that the ages that we are seeing, but again, I think we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. We are seeing probably 13 and up, 12 and up, around that age. So middle school-ish. But it absolutely could happen to younger kids. Yes?
I know you might not be able to answer this, maybe one of you. How much of this is being shared with our students in the school? Is the school doing anything to share this?
So I'd like to, so I'm Sean Spicker, superintendent here at DeWitt Public Schools. So the, I don't know how I'm gonna be on the, for people to hear. So we were fortunate enough that Chris came out to the county-wide superintendent's group to talk about this being an issue, and he came to us actually wanting to do student presentations. And we're all for that, but we wanted to make sure that parents understood the severity before we did that. So the plan is, at least here at DeWitt, that yes, you know, we want to have presentations at the middle and high school levels, but we did want to have parents first kind of understand what this is and why we would be doing that. Good question.
Other questions? Yes?
So what would you recommend as far as how do we protect our kids? Like I came on child, we don't give our kids phones, but when the child is home, short of giving them like a non-smartphone, how else do we protect our kids? What's our job?
The question is, how do we protect our kids as we give them the phone? I wish I had a perfect answer for you. I don't. I would say this: the more we give our kids slowly responsibility, the better off we are. Sort of like we give them keys to a car, right? There's the hours with the parent, and then there's a limited license, and then there's like kind of your full license with your parents' control, and then ultimately they're out of the house, they pay their own insurance, we don't care. So I hesitate to give you from an FBI's perspective what you should do, but I think that the more we can get them off in training wheels before they're being solicited at such a young age. Our kids, as we've all heard, right? Our kids are getting better at technology than us. That's definitely true. And so the more we can slow roll them towards freedom on their phones and computers, the better. And then what I've talked about tonight is less about parenting and more about educating you to educate them about what's happening. I'll give you this example. When teachers talk about something at school, like a wolverine, it might seem really boring, right? And then if parents talk about that same Wolverine, it's still boring. But when the kid sees the Wolverine in the wild, they're like, hey, guess what I just saw, right? And they want to please us. So they say, hey, we saw this. My thought process is we educate the parents to talk about this, the schools, hopefully we can talk about that. And then when our kids see it, like, I got a friend request. I just heard this from a student. I got a friend request and I knew the person because they're friends with like 20 of my friends. And it's not. So by educating them on these things that can happen, they're more apt to bring those to us, and then when they do, that causes them to learn and in the future recognize that fraud. So I hope that answers your question.
So our kids being approached, so our children right now who use a lot of computers in school, they're 10 now. And when they go to the junior high, they will be handed a Chromebook, which they will go home with, which I'm fighting, not successful. Our children being reached through those mediums.
So your question is, are children they're gonna, in middle school, a lot of times you need a Chromebook or some sort of laptop or tablet in order for school, and our kids being reached through those mediums. Less likely, a lot less likely. I don't understand.
Software filters, things of that nature.
Yeah.
So when they're on our networks, then it's a closed kind of circuit. So even though it's the internet, it's being filtered, being watched. We get reports if they're trying to look at certain things, they're blocked from certain things.
Much like with police parked out, an establishment, it kind of, the criminal element kind of stays away. They would definitely target a school through that if they had the opportunity, but it's too easy with apps on phones. So I would think it's kind of a byproduct of both. There's filters and there's things in place, and then secondly, there's much easier prey, so why kind of attack that?
Thank you.
Yes?
If my child provides some sort of images or something like that, is it fair to say that there's not really any intervention that can be done at that point that would prevent those from going out in terms of, are they going to get exploited pretty much no matter what?
So the question is, if a child has sent photographs, is there any way to rescind those? And the answer is absolutely not. Minus they sent it to one of their friends and we can get to their house to say it was a text message, it went to one person. It just cannot be rescinded. There's nothing that scrubs the internet, there's nothing that pulls things down. The truth is, if it went to overseas, that's where it is. Now I will say that when this does happen, sextortion does happen, a child gets caught in it, boom, and that bad actor maybe blows those pictures back out to the friends and family, that's the end of it. Now, you can't be sure that it's over because people receiving that can then save that and store it, but the truth is, the game is over, right? It's like elder fraud. Once you've taken the elderly person's money all the way from them, taking that control away, they can no longer get it. That's sort of the same situation. The bad actors will just move to new people. And I think it opens the question of enforcement. What are we doing? There's only so much we can do with overseas criminals. It requires the assistance of that overseas government. We don't always have that, as you can imagine. The difference between Russia and Canada would be extremes, where Russia would provide us little or no assistance, and Canada would probably provide us a ton of assistance. So that's a major issue in enforcing these. And
a lot of these apps are even from out of the country too.
That's true too. When the apps are out of country, that makes it harder to serve legal process on them. And the actual catching of these criminals is very difficult. Minus inside the United States, it doesn't mean it's not difficult, it's still difficult, but it's much more doable when it's happening by what I would label a creep within the country, because we have the legal process here. Once it goes overseas, it becomes much more difficult. Yes?
How old were your kids when they got cell phones?
How old were my kids when they got cell phones? I don't remember. and I wouldn't tell you even if I did, because I don't remember how old they were. It becomes a necessary evil even when I take my kids' cell phones away as punishment now. They tell me they have to hand in an assignment, and I've learned that's true. Sometimes they have to use their phones for that sort of stuff.
Every child and every family is different, but the importance of that communication, like you asked, is this happening with elementary kids? I would say elementary is not too early to start having these conversations about protecting your data. What is a digital citizen? Making sure that they understand that it's never okay to take nude photos. Like, you can start really early having those conversations. And the earlier you start, the more likely they're going to come to you when there is a problem or a request. Because it's not a taboo topic, right? I mean, my kids were pretty young when we started talking about sex and online predators, and just because I wanted them to know that I was a trusted adult. It's the same thing. Like, don't do this, but if you do this, you need to let me know.
I think it's a mixed bag, right? Like you can start a child really young with a cell phone and with a ton of guidance. And you can also restrict a cell phone till an age that you think they're mature, and that comes with its own set of probably parameters that you would need to set to help that person in. So, yes.
What are your thoughts, or do you have recommendations regarding the parental control apps that are out there now?
The question is, what are my recommendations on the parental control apps? I'm not all that familiar with them, so I don't have a recommendation. I will say that, again, if you look online, you can find a ton of resources on those types of apps and see the pros and cons of each of them.
Can we give Chris a huge thank you for coming out?